keyboard was not working. Was that it? Because it was not in... Hey, all right, hello, let's do it for real. Hello, my name is Liam. I'm an executive director at a little company called CyberCX. I work in the offensive security side of things, hence the red rather than purple t-shirt. And I'm here today to talk about everything in cyber. So what is a cyber? As you can tell from the beard, I'm quite old and grey. I remember when we used to call this information security. At some point along the journey, information security got renamed as cyber. And it's got big and sprawling. It's incredibly broad, it's incredibly deep. So today we're going to, by necessity, go extremely wide, not very deep at all. I'm not an expert in all the different areas of cyber, but that's kind of the point. Like, nobody is an expert in everything. As I said, I specialize in offensive security, but even I don't know like all the things about offensive security. I work with some people who do know a whole lot about their particular area. No one knows everything. And in terms of trying to break things down, like, there's a lot of different ways that you can cut a cake. Our industry has all sorts of different terminology. Sometimes terminology competes with itself. There's overlaps, there's not overlaps. If the words or the breakdown that I use today doesn't completely align with your mental model, that's fine. Neither of us are right or wrong. There's just different ways of thinking about it. So a lot of content to cover. So everything cyber in no particular order. Here we go. Security operations. So let's start with them. Sometimes called the blue team. These are the people who are defenders. These are the people, like manning the walls, if you like, castle or castle metaphors. I don't personally. I would never have done a talk, anything to do with castles. There's like one person laughing. Shout out to the people who were at the last purplecon and got that joke. Callbacks. Cool. So people in security operations, what do they do? People often start thinking about this in terms of tools, right? So it's like, okay, so they use tools to do stuff. We have tools like tools that run on endpoints and try to detect if things have gone bad. And if they have gone bad, can we respond to that and make things not bad? So we talk about things like, CrowdStrike, Defender, endpoint tools, and then those tools like talk back to other tools. So things like security information and event management, or SIEM tools. So things like Splunk, all sorts of different brands. I'm not here to advocate for any vendors over another, but talking just about tech and tools is not a very helpful way of thinking about security, in my opinion. We also need to really think about the processes, right? So what do these people actually do? So they take all these signals, they get them together, they correlate them, and they try and answer questions. So like, has something gone bad? Is this a real problem? Is this just something that we don't have to worry about? Is there trends? Are there things that are changing? What do we need to do to respond to these changes? And then there's also boring stuff like log retention, etc., blah, blah, blah. But tools, processes, the most important thing in cyber is, of course, the people. So in security operations, we talk about things like 24/7 eyes on glass. It's this idea that, like, okay, if something bad happens at 3 a.m., like, who's actually checking and hopefully monitoring and responding to an alert that your stuff just got hacked? People are also super important because machines cannot make decisions. I know we're trying to kid ourselves that that's not the case with AI and a whole bunch of other junk that's going on at the moment. Machines cannot make decisions. It doesn't matter how much window dressing you put on it, people make decisions, people program machines. So the people are the most important. So that's security operations. How's that different to some adjacent things? So we talk about things like threat hunting, which is like going looking for bad things that have happened. People in the SOC might do some sorts of threat hunting. So, like if a new O-Day has come out, if there's an incident going on, they might like say, hey, I'm going to do a bit of a poke around and see if there's other instances of this. But people in the security operations do rely very heavily on these tools, right? There are certain things that will show up in logs, there are certain things that won't show up in logs. So they have definite blind spots, which is why this like threat hunting idea is really important, because you can help come at it from a different perspective, not from a tools and logs perspective, but from a what would this look like, how would I find it out, going for deep dives. That's what threat hunting is. It's also this concept of incident response. So something bad has happened. Usually the people who are running security operations are not going to be the people who do deep dives into investigating an incident, dealing with the incident, simply because if you have one incident and then your whole security operations team's focused on it, if you have another incident, you won't even notice. So we have a specialized team who do incident response. Let's talk about them now. So a lot of cyber is talking about things that like, let's prevent things from going bad. Digital forensics, incident response is for when things have gone bad. Broken into two areas, digital forensics is looking at what has happened. Something bad has happened. We think, maybe, has something bad happened? Answering that question. A lot of people, again, think of this in terms of tech, but often the question that's trying to be answered is like not a tech question, it's a person question. Like, what did a person do? Did a person do this? What was this person trying to do? You know, they may not have succeeded, but there may be evidence of what they did. Need to consider things like, are we doing this just because of business as usual? Is this like an HR issue? Do we have like a malicious insider potentially? Or is this going to end up in court? If it is, then you have to worry about like evidence, chain of custody, etc. We might get a specialist in to help out with that. Incident response is a lot more about like, okay, what is happening right now? So something bad has happened. Someone has hit the big red button and gone, okay, IR is happening. There are a few phases of it that you can see there. There's also some forgotten phases that people forget about. So things like, hey, what if there's stuff that we can do before an incident? So if and when an incident happens, it's not so bad. So we can do preparation. So looking at like, hey, if an incident happens, like how good are our logs? Like, is it actually, like, are we using consistent timestamps? Do we actually know all of our systems? Do we have a really good asset inventory? To be able to answer these. There's also like non-technical preparation. So things like, hey, we're going to use an external party to do our incident response. Like, have we signed legal contracts with them? So like, if we hit the big red button, they can come in immediately. Or are our lawyers going to go, oh, hey, I know you're running an incident, but I'd really like to review this line of this contract before these people touch our systems. It's like, I do not want to be thinking about that during an incident. Get all that stuff out of the way early. Also, like, do executives in an organization know how to deal with this sort of stuff? We can do things like tabletop exercises and say, hey, this is playing out. What do you do? And they say, I do this. They say, no, you don't. That's a bad idea. Let's walk through this. Also, like communication plans, critically important. You can do a perfect textbook technical response to an incident and then stuff up your public comms. You stuffed up the incident in the eyes of the public. Everything went really badly because the comms were bad. Good comms can cover for a poorer technical response, but the other way around is definitely not the case. People do things like lie. Don't lie, ever, about incidents. It's like, we are experiencing technical issues. No, you're not. You got hacked. It's really obvious. It's like, this website is down for maintenance. No, it's not. It's down because these hackers, like you can read it on their Twitter feed. They said they took you down. You are lying. Never, ever lie. Other insights like that can be really important for people responding to these. Cyber intel. So what is cyber intel? It's indicators of compromise. No, it's not. This was the case like 15 years ago, but a lot of people still think this is what cyber intel is. Cyber intel is our understanding of what bad people are trying to do to our systems, what they're actually doing to our systems, the sort of things they're targeting. When they target things, like what do they then do? Why are they doing it? And this changes all the time. This is really important because it informs all sorts of different areas of cybersecurity. Your security operations team need to know what the latest attacks look like, what future ones are likely to look like. If we understand people's intent, then we can sort of like rub the crystal ball and hopefully look a little bit into the future, have a bit of a guess about like what might happen, and then hopefully better prepare for that. Because threats change. The only thing that is consistent in cybersecurity is everything changes all the time. It's really hard. Intel is sort of our way of like trying to wrap some sense around that and do things in a consistent and sensible way, rather than flailing around wildly. So we've talked a bit about when things can go wrong and what bad people are doing, but like, what if we tried to make things not go bad in the first place? Or what if we got friendly people to make things go bad, and then instead of them exploiting it and trying to ransom us for Bitcoin, they could give us a huge 80-page report on all the stuff that we should have done better. And that's essentially in a nutshell what offensive security is. Most people think of penetration testing with offensive security, and that's pretty accurate. Like probably 80% of offensive security is that. There are some other things as well that fall under that. Pen testing is about finding vulnerabilities. This is really important. So we have like a limited scope. It may be a system, it may be an entire organization. Either way, like we have a left and right of arc of what we're looking at. We usually have a certain amount of time as well. Like this is not like an ongoing activity where we're just like constantly hacking. We look at the impact of things. Because we're working in a limited time period, we're trying to do as much as we can within that time period. We are being really, really noisy. So what we're not doing, even though we sometimes tell people we are doing this, it's sort of a lie. We are not doing what bad guys do, by the book. Right? Like we are trying to find the sort of vulnerabilities that bad guys would like to find. We're trying to exploit them, but we're not following the exact same steps that a bad guy would do. And this is important because it means a pen test is not a good test of your ability to detect and respond to someone hacking your systems. People say, oh, we did a pen test and it came up in our logs. We found the pen testers. And the answer to that is, yeah, I should hope so. There was like 1 million failed login attempts. I definitely hope that showed up in your logs. Real world attackers do not necessarily follow those same things because they're optimizing for different things. They're sometimes trying to be a bit sneaky. Like they're not super loud, like pen testers are. So I'm gonna just skip some things because I'm really pressed for time. So there's some other things. There's some cute color coding that we apply in offensive security. So red teaming is a bit distinct from pen testing, right? So red teaming does follow the tactics, techniques, procedures of real world adversaries. So this has a couple of advantages. Number one, you can sort of take this like whole of organizational approach, but also it means that the blue team generally don't know that a red team is happening. With a pen test, you go, hey, we're having a pen test, so if your screen lights up, don't worry about hitting the big red button. With a red team, we don't necessarily tell all the defenders that that's happening. So we can assess, like, hey, were these people good at detecting that something bad happened? And like, if something bad did happen, were they able to stop it? Were they able to eradicate it? This is great. It's also like expensive in terms of effort to do red teaming properly. It just takes a huge amount of time. If someone says, like, oh yeah, we had a red team last week. It's like, no, you didn't. Like you had some sort of pen test last week. Red teams take like months plus in general. But what if, usually the result of a red team on a company that has never had a red team before is that like, hey, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you could have done better. What if we could shortcut that and just say, hey, what are all the things that you should do before we do a red team? What if the red team and the blue team work together, and that's what red plus blue makes purple, or a purplecon. Purple teaming is super effective. It's sort of like an open book thing where like a red team will go, hey, I did the thing. First of all, like, did a tool block me or was I able to do it? When it happened, did I raise an alert? And the blue team will go, oh, let me check. Yeah, there was an alert raised for that. Or, oh, no, actually, you did a bad thing and that's not on any of my logs. We'd be like, cool, let's make a note of that and fix it. So this is a super effective way of like sort of raising the maturity of the blue team without running a full red team exercise. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you need to consider that I will skip over. So what if, instead of us doing all this offensive security at the very end of projects, we could do security earlier on in the piece and try and like bake security into all our processes. And that is sort of the idea behind AppSec. So the mantra of AppSec that you hear people talking about is push security left. And they're thinking about a timeline of sort of like, okay, we're doing requirements, design, analysis, implementation, and then normally at that very last phase, that's when we do the security, right? It's like, no, let's do security everywhere. This idea that like we're not going to just leave security till last, we're going to integrate it into everywhere. And AppSec sort of grew out of this idea of developing applications, right? So like we're writing code, we're writing our Python, C#, whatever. And we're going to look at integrating security into all parts of the software development lifecycle. Well, in modern times, like AppSec has actually grown a bit bigger than this. So like the name is no longer like super accurate because it can cover things other than applications, right? So like we have infrastructure as code. We're writing Terraform scripts that then like define like what our cloud's going to look like. It's like, can we bake security into that process? Like, yes, we absolutely can, using all the same processes as AppSec. Still sort of called AppSec. So is it the software development lifecycle or just the development lifecycle? Yes. So there's a whole bunch of things that we can do at the various phases. So like early on, like we can talk about threat models. So like we talked about, threat intel tells us like what a bad guy's trying to do, how are they trying to do it? So like we think, okay, what does that mean in the context of our system? Like how could our system be broken by someone trying to do those things? And then we write a whole bunch of things. So like our system should not let them do that. Cool, that's a requirement. Write it down. Make sure that our system actually does that when we build it. That's what threat modeling is. It's just a way of thinking about threats. It's a little bit of a formal system to help you think through that. All sorts of other stuff like, are we building our system out of like components and bricks that are, known good or known bad? Could they go wrong? Is there supply chain concerns? Can we use tooling to like look at all our code and go, hey, that bit's bad. Like, why are we doing it that way? Yes, we can. Static analysis, dynamic analysis. It's really cool. Look into it. And also, AppSec tends to cover a whole bunch of like adjacent things like security training. And I'm not talking about like security awareness training. I'm talking about like how people, engineers, developers, all the other people in a development lifecycle can integrate security and what do they need to know about security. That generally falls under an AppSec program. That also includes people like, project managers and, people doing agile stuff because it's like, hey, in your project, did you put time for security? Because if you don't put time for security, security doesn't happen. And things like security champions programs. So like, who are the people in your organization who are going to tell everyone else that security is super cool and everyone should be doing it security, and if you have questions, talk to me about security. There's also this concept of ProdSec. So if you like look up a definition of that, people say like, oh, ProdSec is about like the security of like the whole product, like not just the sub application. And AppSec people go like, but no, I actually care about that as well. There's a little bit of like friction, disagreement about like what ProdSec versus AppSec is. The best explanation I've heard is someone who said like, ProdSec is what you get when you have a really big AppSec team that then becomes too big and needs to split in two. It's not really relevant. There are all sorts of like architectural things to consider when building secure systems. One of the really important ones that everything else hinges on is how we're managing identity. So like, who is someone? How do we prove that someone is who they are? There's all the different like authentication factors that we can use. This is relatively easy when you have like one system and one idea of an identity. But if all of a sudden you have 5 systems or 10 systems or 100 systems, and then you need to have consistent identities across those, the identities can't live in those systems. The identities have to live in a dedicated identity management system. This is what identity and access management is. So it's a process and mechanisms for doing this in a consistent way. So much security hinges on this. If we do it badly, things go badly. If we do it right, a lot of things can be good. We worry about like, what types of auth, do we get people to do multi-factor? Are there phishing resistant ways of doing it, etc. There's all sorts of complexities to this that you may not first consider. So like, okay, that's for regular users of the system. When we say regular users, do we mean like internal users? Do we mean like external users? Depends on the system. Privileged users of the system, they're higher risk, like admins. If they get popped, things are a lot worse. Like, do we have different system for admins? Is privileged management system? Okay, what if people like join the organization? What if they've like changed jobs? What about when they leave? Like, how do we make sure that all their access is cut off, etc.? It's a whole thing. And then there's this like governance overlay. Like, how do we make sure that we're doing all the right things? I mainly wanted to include this because I really love the phrase toxic combinations is a thing in IDAM apparently. It's this idea that like, hey, if you let people do these 2 different jobs, this is like prime time for crime. So it's like, if you're in a finance system and you have access to accounts payable and accounts receivable, it's crime time. So like, do we have a way of detecting if we've set ourselves up for crime and fraud? And if we do, what are our ways to detect it? Can we have like 2 people need to be in the loop to do this sort of stuff? That's governance of identity and access management. But governance is a much bigger conversation in IT. In fact, this is a whole discipline. Governance, risk, and compliance is a whole thing. There's a whole people that work in GRC, as we call it. So there's things like different frameworks that we need to comply with in different contexts. So things like if you're handling credit cards, then there is a specific payment card industry digital security standards, or PCI DSS. There's a whole bunch of rules for how you handle credit cards. And the way that you do that is you don't handle credit cards, you use a third-party vendor, and then you don't have to worry about PCI DSS. But those sort of policies are the things that you need to know about and understand so you don't accidentally start handling credit cards and then open yourself up to all sorts of issues. So what we do is the policy part of it, how we do it, we have standards and procedures, and then all the why of everything we do needs to be informed by risk, right? So that's where the risk comes in. And then also there's compliance is sometimes you just gotta. If you work in certain industries, there will be certain rules that you need to follow. If you work in the utilities sector, there will be the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act, and it's just says you must do all these things. There's a whole bunch of frameworks that GRC people work under. You'll think there's things like the International Standards Organization, Information Security, Cybersecurity and Privacy Protection, Information Security Management Systems Requirements Document. Or ISO 27001, as is most commonly known. There is a couple of different versions of them. So ISO 27001, NIST, CSF, Cybersecurity Framework, or in Australia, the ACSC Essential 8 Controls is meant to be a simplified version of that. If you look under the hood, it's oh wait, this isn't 8 at all. This is 35 different controls dressed up in trench coats to pretend to only be 8. But like all areas of security, the most important thing in governance, risk and compliance is people. Because if you can write whatever policies you want, if your policies are going to work against people and the way they want to work, they won't follow the policies, they'll work around the policies. If you set your policy up to work against people, your strategy will fail. Strategy. Cyber strategy. Cyber strategy is the thing that CISOs and CSOs actually do. That's their day job. They're not there going, what should our policy on, TLS 1.1? Is that gone now? We have TLS 1.2 only? High-level executives in cybersecurity don't care about this sort of stuff. They want to answer questions like, hey, am I doing cyber enough? Are we doing cyber not enough? Are we doing cyber in the right places? And that can be a really hard question to answer because if you talk to vendors, the answer is more. I need more of your money. Please give me all your money until your organization spends 100% of its budget on cyber and goes broke. So we probably don't want that to be the case. So we need to be able to achieve your goals securely but without actually overspending on cyber. So how do we make these decisions? We do things like business impact analysis. So we look at, hey, what do I actually care about in this business from a cyber perspective? What do I care about it? Is it really important that this stays up all the time? Or is it really important that the integrity of this data is sacrosanct? Both, either, are there other things I care about? And what are the critical assets that mean that those business processes can be followed? So we answer those questions, and then that helps drive the strategy of where we do all our work in cyber. Again, considerations, people. People, again, are the most important thing because good people can overcome bad processes and bad technology. If you invest a huge amount in technology and nothing in people and processes, you'll fail. Because good technology cannot overcome the fact that people have not been correctly empowered and trained to do their job. I started the slide deck way early, so according to this, I'm at minute 83 of this talk. I don't think I've quite run that far over time, but I do think that I'm pretty much up against the thing. So I was obviously way too keen, thinking I could talk about absolutely everything in cyber in 20 minutes. There is a whole bunch of stuff that we did not cover. You can see a whole bunch of them there. I won't talk through them, but I did want to leave you with the idea that this, cybersecurity is an incredibly broad field. Nobody knows everything. It would be really weird if someone did know everything, because things change all the time, and you can't even keep up with all the changes. So nobody has all the answers, but if we all work together as a team, we can have all the answers. And we've got this. I would like to call out thank you to all the people who are experts in a whole bunch of these different areas and helped me greatly. If there were any errors made in this presentation, they were 100% mine. If there were any great points made, they were the points of these people and also me. Thank you very much.